My name is Eleanor Hayes, but the folks at Willow Creek Hardware still call me Nora. Like they did when my husband, Walt, and I ran Saturday errands and shared a grape soda in the parking lot. Walt's been gone 3 years. I am 67, the kind of widow who keeps a list on the fridge titled, Things I Can Fix Without Asking, and a second list in my Bible titled, Things I Will Hand to God Because I Can't Lift Them. Lonely isn't the right word. My house hums with the radio and the porch light. Neighbors bring tomatoes. I bake on Thursdays and give the uneven cookies to the mail carrier, because he looks like a man who would rather have a crooked kindness than none at all. I miss Walt the most when the coffee pot gurgles, and no one says, Morning, Elle, like a promise he intended to keep for 1,000 years. The night my son Brian and his wife Tiffany hosted their post-wedding big reveal party, new house, new plans, new everything. The sky over Willow Creek acted like a clean sheet snapping on a clothesline. The hired catering came with glossy trays. There was a seating chart on a chalkboard sign, names written in chalk that tried to be calligraphy. I searched for Hayes, Eleanor, and found a sticky note instead. Family garage. In the garage, a folding chair waited by the deep sink. There was an orange extension cord coiled like a polite snake and a cooler sweating on the concrete. I told myself it was a practical choice, close to the drinks, close to the backdoor breeze. I sat. I have sat in worse places and gotten good stories from my trouble. From the kitchen, laughter rolled like a tide. Someone set a plate on the washer next to me. You don't mind, do you? A voice said without waiting for my answer. I smiled at the plate the way you smile at a neighbor's dog. What did I expect, you're wondering? A throne? No. A regular chair at a regular table would have fit me just fine. The centerpiece in the dining room, visible through the door, caught my eye and held it. A runner made of patchwork squares, familiar as my own hands. I made that quilt the first winter after Walt and I married. We ate on it during storms, and when we pulled it back into the linen cupboard, we smelled electricity for 3 days. I had been looking for that quilt for weeks. I chalked it up to grief's tricks. I didn't march in and make a scene. I placed my palm on the cool metal of the washer and counted to 7. On 7, I took out my phone and called the only person who has ever told me the truth in a tone that makes me want to hear it again. Attorney Grace Lynn. Mrs. Hayes, she answered on the second ring, weak and soft. Grace, I said quietly, pause the trust transfer to Brian. All of it. We need to review the terms as we discussed in contingency. No problem, she said like I'd asked for a second cup of tea. I'll file the notice tonight. I set the phone down. No thunder shook the refrigerator magnets. The breeze did what breezes do, and my chair squeaked a little, the way folding chairs warn you they're on your side but have limits. That's when the voices drifted in from the kitchen. The clink of a glass, then Tiffany's mother, polished bright as a new coin. We'll get the paperwork handled next week, she said. Power of, she lowered her voice, you know. It's cleaner for everyone if Brian can sign on her behalf. She'll be more comfortable with decisions off her plate. Brian's laugh ran along the counter like a spilled drink. Mom's fine. She's independent. And the house, well, it's big. Exactly, Tiffany said. Downsizing would be kind. We'll host holidays. It'll be fun. Fun. I have nothing against fun, but it rarely introduces itself before it rearranges your furniture. I stayed in the garage until the cake came out. A little cousin wandered in, carrying a stack of napkins cut from my quilt. Pretty, she said, rubbing the fabric on her cheek. I touched the edge and felt my own stitches, small, stubborn, hopeful. When the last guest left and the kitchen smelled like citrus and relief, I asked Tiffany for the runner. Oh my gosh, Nora, she said, eyes wide. We found it in a box labeled linens keep. I thought, reuse, reduce, recycle. If it's important, of course it's yours. I folded it the way the women who raised me folded the flag at Uncle Dean's memorial, sharp corners, respect arranged into geometry. I kissed Tiffany's cheek because kindness is my dialect even when it makes my throat ache. On my way out I hugged Brian and he withered a little. My boy is a good man who sometimes forgets his own measurements. At home I laid the quilt across the couch. I made tea strong enough to stand up by itself. Then I opened a folder in my desk marked just in case and read the notes Walt and I wrote with Grace 3 winters ago when a neighbor's nephew moved into his house and moved out his autonomy in under a month. The folder held a plan called the Porch Light Project. Walt had written in the margin, "When we're gone, leave the light on for everyone." On Monday, Brian called before I had my first slice of toast. "Mom?" He was trying to sound calm, like a man demonstrating a blender at the fair while bees investigate the lemonade stand. "Grace contacted the bank. Did something happen?" "I was seated in the garage," I said, too plainly for him to dodge. "Also, I saw our storm quilt under the cake." Silence then. "It was just logistics. The house was full." "Houses are for being full," I said. "Son, the pause is temporary. We'll meet with Grace and adjust the plan to match who we are, not who a chalkboard says we should be." "Mom," he sighed, "Tiffany and I have been planning." "I know," I said. "So have I." Grace's office smells like paper that tells the truth. She slid the revised documents across the table with the neatness of a person who respects both the law and good desks. "We'll convert the homestead and your savings into the Porch Light Fund, a community trust," she said. "It keeps you secure, supports local families with repairs and ramps and weatherproofing, and if you want, sets a path for family stewardship based on participation, not proximity." "Participation," I echoed. "Like church choir but with lumber." Grace smiled. "Exactly. Here were the bones of the plan. 1. The house stays in my name for life. No one can sell it from under me. 2. The porch and garage become a Saturday workshop. Free repairs, tool library, and kettle of coffee that never runs out. We call it the Porch Light. 3. The trust funds small grants for neighbors who can't afford the fix they need. The committee will be community members, not just kin, unless kin show up as community. 4. If Brian and Tiffany want to be part of it, they can. There's a door." I texted Brian and Tiffany. "Pot roast Friday 6 p.m. Family meeting." I added a pot roast emoji because I am not above modern conveniences when meat is involved. Friday came smelling like onions and thyme. I set the table for 6: me, Brian, Tiffany, my granddaughter June, her husband Marco, and my neighbor Mrs. Dorsey, who says she has opinions about everything except salad dressing. When everyone settled, I put the papers under the salt shaker. "2 things," I said. "First, I love you. Second, the Porch Light project begins next month. Here's the plan." Brian's mouth opened, then closed. Tiffany looked at the paper like it might hum. "So, you're giving to the community instead of us?" "I am inviting you to BUS," I said. "There's a leadership path if you want it. It's not a seat because of your last name. It's a pair of gloves." Brian stared at the roast like it had a quiz for him. "Mom, we were going to remodel the guest room. For you." "I have a guest room," I said. "It's full of quilts and a sewing machine and a radio that plays the station Walt liked. I'm not a suitcase. I'm a person with a porch." Sweet June reached for my hand. "Grandma, can I help?" I looked at the girl I used to push on the swing until my arms hummed. "I was hoping you'd ask." The next Saturday, we painted the garage door a cheerful blue and rolled out 2 workbenches Walt made the winter the flu took the town by the collar. I hung a sign above the coffee urn. "Pay with stories." I posted one photo on the Willow Creek Facebook page. Me in my apron holding a screwdriver like a promise. I typed, "Saturdays 8 to 2. Bring what's broken. We'll try." It took exactly 2 hours for the first person to arrive. A father carrying a wobbly chair. A mother with a broken stroller wheel. A boy clutching a flashlight that wouldn't. We fixed what we could, taught each other what we didn't know, and laughed the way tired people laugh when something finally works. A teenager filmed a clip of his grandpa and me restringing a blind and posted it with the caption, "Nora's Porch Light equals free fixes plus cookies plus stories. Bring your stuff." By Sunday, people from the next town over were asking if we took toasters. Someone suggested a hashtag. June picked Porch Light on. I don't chase trends, but I do know a good porch when I sit on one. Brian and Tiffany didn't come that first week. They came the third. Brian brought lemonade and stood at the edge of the garage like a man waiting to be sent to the principal. Tiffany wore the kind of sneakers you buy to announce that you are ready for a race and also compliments. "We brought cups," she said. "Good," I said. "You can man the story table. People pay with their mouths, not their cards." Tiffany blinked, laughed, and got to work. She wrote names and stories on index cards, built a tower from them, and knocked it down twice because toddlers are structurally honest. At noon, a widow named Connie who can outbake angels pressed a slice of pie into Tiffany's hand and said, "Thank you for doing this, honey." Tiffany paused like the word honey contained a door she hadn't noticed. Brian replaced a screen door spring with Marco coaching, and June cheering like a little league team no one told to hush. "Mom," Brian said on the walk to his car, "this is good." "That's what we were going for," I said. He looked relieved and unsure. The way men look when their boots are new and they're deciding if the blister is worth the rest of the day. Grace drafted a family stewardship pathway written in language that didn't require a dictionary or a prayer. Step 1, show up for 10 Saturdays. Step 2, complete the safety training. Step 3, volunteer for a porch call. Our name for going to someone's house whose problem couldn't fit in a hatchback. Step 4, committee meeting, then vote. If you make it through and the committee says yes, you become a steward, key holder, budget voice, keeper of the coffee. I mailed the packet to Brian and Tiffany with a note as plain as my kitchen. "If you want in, the door opens from your side. Love, Mom." June signed up the same day. Tiffany texted me 2 days later. "We want in. Do you have gloves in a small?" Week 5 she brought a label maker. She did not label me. I took that as progress. She stuck neat white words on drawers, nails, screws, sandpaper, battery chargers, and on the cookie tin which now said "for stories only." We took porch calls together. Mrs. Dorsey's friend needed a grab bar in her shower. Brian drilled, I steadied. Tiffany learned to hold a level and not wrinkle her nose at the way grout dust flirts with your eyelashes. June organized a toy bin for a single dad whose living room looked like an adorable tornado had stayed for breakfast and lunch. The hashtag porchlight on posts trickled and then poured. People filmed themselves sitting on their own steps, telling one favorite story in 1 minute, then challenging a neighbor to do the same. The phrase porchlight promise began to appear. A handmade sign folks put on their doors that said in shaky marker, "If my light is on, you can knock." I worried about safety. Grace wrote a note for the page. Use common sense. Bring a buddy. Hospitality and caution can share a plate. One Tuesday evening my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Tiffany standing on the porch with 2 pies and eyes that knew how to shine without asking permission. "Peace offering," she said, lifting the pies like the Statue of Liberty would if she were from Georgia. "Tiffany," I said, "because sometimes a name is all the blessing you're allowed to give before you cry. Come in." We set the pies on the counter. "I was wrong about the quilt," she blurted. I didn't think. I wanted everything to look like a magazine that didn't hire any of the people I actually know. Also, the garage seat was practical, I said gently, and it taught me what I needed to know. We ate slices at the sink like jailbirds who discovered they had a key the whole time. Then Tiffany asked a question that landed like a bird that trusts your hand. "What happens if we do all the hours?" "You get a vote," I said. "And a key." She exhaled. "Okay. I want to be the kind of woman who earns keys." So they did the hours. They wore out their sneakers on Saturdays and ended up liking the dust. Brian learned that a hand plane can make a boy look like his father and his grandfather all at once. Tiffany learned that people will tell you their whole life if you hand them a cup and ask, "How old is that recipe?" Halfway through autumn, Grace said, "It's time." She set a date at the community center. We invited the town. I bought napkins with leaves on them because I am still me. We held the vote under basketball hoops that had seen triumphs and disasters, both involving squeaky sneakers. The stewards-to-be stood at the front. June in work boots with daisies drawn on the toes. Marco quietly competent. Mrs. Dorsey who can out-argue a man without raising her voice. Brian stiff but trying. Tiffany fingers laced so tightly she could have made diamonds. Before the vote I had one more reveal. I pulled a sheet off a bench painted a cheerful green. "This," I said, "belongs on my porch now and on yours later." It's the first green bench of Willow Creek. In some towns, a green bench means a public place to rest. In ours, it means something else too. If you sit on it, you agree to listen. Not fix. Not debate. Listen. 10 minutes. That's the rule. People nodded the way people nod when their bones recognize a good idea before their heads can say it. June went first and told a 1-minute story about the time Grandpa Walt fixed the wobbly table, and then made it wobble again because a table has to tell the truth. Brian, to my surprise, sat next to her and told the story about the dog we didn't adopt because we couldn't afford love that year, and how the next year we could, and we did. Tiffany stood, hands shaking, and said, I seated a woman I love by the garage sink. I'm sorry. I'm trying to learn what a table is for. The vote was a simple show of hands and stayed simple because truth has a way of settling like a level on a quiet board. June, yes. Marco, yes. Mrs. Dorsey, yes. Tiffany, yes. Brian, not yet. He took it like a man who has been told the weather and knows how to pack a raincoat. After the meeting, he hugged me and said, I'll keep showing up. That's all the door wants, I said. What I didn't say out loud was the rest of the plan, which Grace and I had tucked under our elbows like a bird that would fly when it was ready. We scheduled it for the town Thanksgiving, when the high school choir sings and the firehouse smells like nutmeg and somebody's idea of stuffing that involves apples. On Thanksgiving morning, I set the green bench on the porch and tied a ribbon to the mailbox. The porch light folks set up tables along the sidewalk, pies cooling, coffee steaming, tools lined up like a parade of help. The choir sang. The firemen told jokes only they enjoyed. At noon I carried out a wooden toolbox, Walt's. The handle is worn where his hand wore it, and I still like to press my finger there when I need to feel his yes. Friends, I said to the crowd that had gathered because small towns hate to miss a story. This box holds this year's gift. Inside, under the hammer and square and pencils that have more optimism than a pep rally, was a folder. Grace handed me a microphone that had announced basketball scores and spelling bee winners for 30 years. The Porch Light Fund is endowed, I said. Last week, 3 neighboring hardware stores and our local bank matched your donations from the #PorchLightOn campaign. Every repair we do next year is already paid for. We can keep the light on for a long while. People cheered with faces and hands and a kind of relief that smells like cinnamon. And now, I continued, I have 3 envelopes. I lifted them. On one I'd written June. On the second, Tiffany. On the third, Brian. To June, I said, and the girl whose knees I patched with bandages shaped like stars blinked at me. For being the first to sign up and the last to leave. A scholarship from the fund to study community design. How to build neighborhoods that make room for lemonade stands and green benches. June cried and tried not to, which I endorsed. To Tiffany, I said, and the woman who had learned to hold a level like it was a confession held her breath. For turning our stories into bridges, for collecting people the way some folks collect spoons. A small grant to start the Willow Creek Story Swap. A monthly evening where neighbors trade recipes and skills. We'll host it at the community center on real tables with real chairs. Tiffany cried without trying not to, which I also endorsed. And to Brian, I said, and my son straightened his shoulders the way he did before his first T-ball swing. For showing up even when the vote said not yet, an offer. Not a deed, not a check. A year as operations lead for Porch Calls. It pays enough to keep your lights on, comes with health insurance from the fund, and leads to a steward vote next Thanksgiving. The keys are on the ring. If you say yes, you take the box and everything in it. If you say no, you hand it to the next name on the list. Brian looked at me. He looked at the town. He looked at the green bench like it might answer. I say yes, he said, voice steady. We ate. We laughed. We told stories that were too long and too good to shorten. At dusk, just when the light makes my street look like a memory you can walk into, a car pulled up and out stepped someone I didn't expect. Mrs. Alvarez, the realtor who had shown Brian and Tiffany half the houses in the county. She held a paper and a set of keys. Mrs. Hayes, she said, I think these belong to you now. The paper was a deed. To the little storefront on Maple where the bakery used to be. Someone had bought it in my name. Anonymous donor, Mrs. Alvarez said, smiling at a mystery like it was a good pie. They said you'd know what to do with it. They wrote in block letters, make it a light. I knew. Of course I knew. I looked at the green bench. I looked at June with her scholarship and Tiffany with her stories and Brian with Walt's toolbox. I looked at the town that had held me up when I was sure grief had turned my bones to chalk. We'll make it a Porch Light Annex, I said. A place for winter repairs and Wednesday biscuits. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I took the key to the Maple storefront and opened the door to the cold, sweet air of an empty room ready to be useful. The floors needed sanding. The walls needed watching. I ran my hand along the counter and felt Walt's yes again. As I turned to leave, a woman cleared her throat. She had the fragile look of someone learning how to be strong the hard way. "I'm sorry," she said, voice quivering like a screen in wind. "Are you Nora? My name is Kendra. I'm the one who posted your garage story. I didn't mean for it to explode." "Explode?" I said, picturing my coffee urn and ducking instinctively. "Online," she rushed. "The clip of you with the green bench? It got picked up. A Grant Foundation saw it. They want to fund 10 porch light shops in rural towns. They asked who runs this one." I laughed, and it sounded like a woman who'd been holding a note in her chest and finally let it out. "We all do," I said. "Sign says so." Kendra swallowed. "Can I tell you something else? Tiffany's mom called me after the wedding. She asked me to take down a photo where it looked like you were in the garage. I didn't. I felt wrong about that." "I don't need it taken down," I said. "Some stories become tools. They fix what they touch." That night on the porch, I sat on the green bench and watched the street red itself into evening. A car slowed. Tiffany's mother stepped out. "Eleanor," she said, handing me a pie, because older women learn from each other eventually, "I owe you an apology. You owe me a chair at your table next time," I said gently. "That will do." She sat. 10 minutes. She told me the truth not because I dragged it from her but because the bench did. She said she was afraid of being unneeded. She said her mother had been sharp and she had learned sharp like a second language. She said she wanted her daughter to be safe and thought safety was money arranged into rows. I told her what I tell myself. Love is a verb that spends itself in wood screws and phone calls and showing up with pie. The twist then. I didn't disinherit anyone. I didn't banish. I widened the table and put a green bench outside for those who weren't ready to sit at it yet. I moved the inheritance into motion and made it something you have to chase with your feet, not your lawyer. I gave my son a job, not out of pity but out of belief that men become who they practice being. I handed my daughter-in-law a room to fill with stories, and watched her discover that listening is a skill you can be proud of. And the anonymous donor? December taught me something. Some mysteries are only generous if you let them remain so. People asked me if it was the bank or the hardware stores, or a man with a hat and a soft spot for old ladies and good causes. I smiled and said what Walt would have said. Could be Providence. On Christmas Eve, Brian locked up the Maple shop after the last toy car wheel was glued back on. He hung the key on a hook and turned off the lights. Then he turned them back on. "Porch light promise," he said, laughing, and left them glowing. I go to bed early these days. My knees are opinionated. Before I sleep, I check the lists on the fridge. Today I fixed a leaky kitchen sprayer, a friendship, a plan. Today I hand it to God, timing, and the people I love who are still finding the door. My porch light stays on. If you're passing through Willow Creek and you need a cup of something warm and a place to sit, come by. Bring what's broken. We'll try. 10 minutes on the green bench and we'll listen. You may leave with your lamp repaired and your heart held together by the same screws.